How many times am I going to get cut off? I don't know why this happens. Don't know why. So let's put the over under at 58. That's how many times this is going to happen. Anyway, just talking about the traditional media and the fact that we thought it was awesome that we were online because somebody from Wichita could read our stories. And unless you had a subscription and you had the paper delivered to Wichita, which wasn't happening, we thought it was cool that all these people around the country could conceivably read what we were writing. What we didn't see was the fact that that this free online content meant subscribers weren't going to pay for it, and also when things like Craigslist came along, there went the ads. So the Cincinnati Enquirer went from about this thick on Sundays to about this thick on Sundays because all the ads went away. So big problem. So media has to resort to tricks to make money, like what you if you want to click on 1A on your supplemental thing, it's www.dailylight.net. One of the tricks that the media companies will do to try to get you to go to their site is clickbait. So they purposely have an ambiguous way to write a headline that makes you think that this is going to be maybe a really interesting or important story. And of course, in this case, it ends up being a story about, well, the headline is Mom Leaves Dad Alone with Their Daughter, but she never expected this to happen. What could it be? It sounds so interesting. And it ends up being nothing more than a dad and a daughter dancing. And you feel used and cheated with clickbait. But it works because the psychology of us wanting to know overrides our more realistic understanding that it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. The other thing media companies will do is on letter B, our friends at BuzzFeed will used to force you to click multiple times. If you'll click on the on that copy and paste that URL from BuzzFeed, that's letter number one, letter B. BuzzFeed used to have a bunch of slideshows, so that they would have these listicles, which are articles in list form instead of the more traditional paragraph form, like you're seeing here. Life is meaningless and nothing matters, so you might as well read this. They used to be in slideshow form, which meant you for after each one that you read, you'd have to click and move to the next one, and each click helped BuzzFeed or any of the organizations that did that get more money. It gave a chance for more ads to pop up, for instance, each time you clicked. Those slideshows have generally gone away because readers hated them so much, but you'll still see them out there. Either way, the media companies try to keep you on their sites as long as possible. They know that if you stay on their sites longer, they can tell companies that want to advertise that the average viewer stays on for 8.6 minutes. And ad rates will be determined based on how long people stay on that site, which is why Facebook makes so much money because people stay on sites like Facebook for hours and hours and hours. This is not great what's happening with the news organizations by and large, but it's not all bad news. There's so many more places where you can work if you can write well, if you want to be a journalist. And it's a great time to be a journalist. It really is. Or it's a great time to go into marketing or PR or communications because of the vast number of online companies that are out there hiring, and they love young people mainly because you're cheap, but they love young people. And so if you have writing skills, and most of you also have these extra skills in social media and other technology, then in many cases you can write your own ticket. So that's the good news. I'm going to move to chapter 2. I'm going to start with chapter 2 instead of chapter 1. There's one more thing on your supplemental, and that's couching paid content. If you look under letter C in number 1, this is from NBCnews.com, and you'll see the little green sponsored things next to headlines. Those are actually ads. Just they look like regular news articles. Most people probably won't even realize that they aren't news articles, but if they are uh, presented so well, so much like news articles that companies really like to put their ads like that. Or letter D, paying to place stories on more legitimate sites. For a long time, Bleacher Report, which was a news site that started about 10 years ago or so. Nobody was going there, and so they went to places like CNN, LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and they started paying those news organizations to put headlines on their sites. And so when people would click on them, so if you see the CNN um, screenshot that I have under letter D, under sports, I think just about all of those are Bleacher Report articles, but you wouldn't know it. It looks like CNN actually wrote those stories, reporters for CNN, but when you would click on those, it would immediately transport you to Bleacher Report. So that's another way that companies are trying to get you to their sites. Anyway, let's go back to what I was going to talk about, which is chapter 2. Very, very quick, very quick, because I've chopped a lot of this up. Historical lesson on the media then and now, which I talked briefly in class about. But it's important that you understand you have at least a general understanding of what media was and what media is now. So if you remember in class back in the day, you had the big three: CBS, NBC, ABC. You had PBS too, but the three networks were the only ones on TV, no cable, and no CNN, no WTBS, no WGN. None of that existed, and you became really loyal to a station. My parents were NBC people; they loved John Chancellor, which meant he was the 6:30 p.m. news anchor. That was the coveted spot, man. If you made it to that, there were only 3 positions, but if you made it to that as the news anchor for one of the big 3, then that's about as good as it got. John Chancellor, we loved him. Then Tom Brokaw took over on NBC after him. I loved him. So Lester Holt, I believe, is there now, and I say I believe because I don't really watch 6:30 news anymore. I get my news online like the rest of you. Anyway, those were the 3 options, and we trusted them. Back in the, I don't know, 50 years ago, Walter Cronkite was on CBS, and people trusted him so much they called him Uncle Walt. If you want to click on that link with John Chancellor and David Brinkley, you'll see those 2 men. If you notice something about them, this is the analysis part of Bloom's taxonomy, you'll notice they're both men, they're both white men. And that was how it was for a long, long time. You saw no people of color, you saw no women, you saw no Asians or Hispanic, and nobody. It was white men for a long time. And no accents other than Midwest accents. Nobody with a Southern accent, nobody with a New York accent or Minnesota accent, Boston, those are out. You had to have a pretty bland, accent-free way of speaking, that and be a white man, and that got you that job. Anyway, Walter Cronkite was the most famous of all, and one of the most iconic moments in TV news history happened during the Vietnam War, which was going on in the 60s and early 70s, where Cronkite went to Vietnam and then came back and told America that we need to get out, that it's just not going to work. And this was a risk for him because you had a good sizable part of the population who believed in the war, sizable part of the population protested it and wanted it over. So if you will, under number 3, letter A, click on that link, the YouTube link, and watch that. It's about a minute where it's the actual footage of Walter Cronkite telling America that it's time to leave. Pause me and then watch that. Okay, I'm going to keep talking, so if you didn't pause me, then I would pause me. I'll do that when I'm asking you to click. You should just pause me and move on to the links that I'm sending you. The next link is Cronkite reflecting on that broadcast. It's, I think, about 5 minutes long, so if you would please go ahead and watch that. Pause me, watch that, and then come back to me. Okay, so you should have watched that video. The key sentence at the end of that is the President of the United States at the time, Lyndon Baines Johnson, watching Cronkite say we should get out of the war. He turns off the TV and says, if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost middle America. That's how trusted a journalist was then. And it got so bad for Johnson, he decided not to run for president in the next election. He had taken over once when Kennedy had gotten assassinated. He was a pretty popular president. He probably would have gotten reelected, But part of the reason why he didn't run was because a journalist had turned on him. Imagine Barack Obama watching Sean Hannity one night in 2015, and Hannity says something so profound that Barack Obama decides that he's not going to be president anymore. Or imagine Donald Trump watching Rachel Maddow one night, and Rachel Maddow says something, and Trump says, "That's it. I don't think I'm going to run for president in 2020. Highly unlikely." We live in different times, that's for sure. So anyway, we now have thousands of options for news, online, TV, radio, social media, and the key is whom do you trust, especially when everyone seems to be able to refute the other side on any issue. And news is now 24 hours. It's not just from 6 to 6:30 in local news and 6:30 to 7 in national news. 24 hours a day. Sports, we have ESPN, ESPN2. I think we have ESPN. Do we have ESPN3 still? I forget. ESPNU. I mean, you can get all kinds of sports 24 hours a day. And the problem, of course, with this is that it's not all news 24 hours a day. It's a little bit of news, and then they have to fill up the rest of that time, and they fill it up with opinions. And people are fighting to be heard. Watch Stephen A. Smith for a little bit on ESPN, or somebody like Sean Hannity, or somebody like Rachel Maddow. And you're going to see a lot of times, because they know they're fighting to be heard, they've got to say things sometimes that are pretty outlandish, because they know that that's going to drive people to watch what they have to say. They become must-see TV for some folks. But again, as I said in class, these are not journalists. These are personalities. These are commentators on the news. The problem is that most people don't know the difference. But we're not only changing how we get our news, we're changing the skills that people need to have to report on the news. And this is called convergence. This is from page 4 of your textbook. So we're into the first chapter. That you have to have more than just, you have to be more than just a writer. You have to be more than just one thing. If you don't have the word convergence on your resume, or if your resume doesn't show that you are multi-talented and that you can multitask, it's time to clean up your resume, because you now in some cases can take the job of more than one person because of your multiple skills. And here's an example. If you go to number 4 on your supplemental, the Chicago Sun-Times photographers who in 2013 were summarily fired. All of them, gone. Even a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, gone. Why? Because all they did was take pictures. And so if you click on the next article, you'll see that the solution for the Sun-Times is they were going to train their reporters on how to take pictures with their iPhones, which you're probably like, OMG, really? Yeah, really, because we old people don't really know a lot of stuff. And so the Sun-Times realized if we can train our reporters on how to take pictures, yeah, the pictures won't be as good, but we now have one person who can do 2 things, and that's going to save us money. So convergence is key for anybody who wants to go into not only journalism, marketing, PR, all of that. Learn multiple skills. You're going to take some pictures in this class. This is not a photography class. This is a news writing class, but I at least want you to be able to be truthful on your resume that you can use an iPhone or any other phone device to take pictures. Okay, we're moving on to the pros and cons of today's media. Most young people are getting their news through social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or other social media platforms. If you click on number 6, how young people get their news, this is a kind of a dated article, but still holds true of where you get your news. Not too dated, 2016. A majority of U.S. adults, 62%, get news on social media. So make sure you read through that article and see how Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, those sorts of sites, just how important those are when it comes to where people get their news, and especially when it comes to young people. And of course, the key and the reason why a lot of young people gravitate to places like Twitter is because, remember, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And you all like the way that, I'm generalizing, but you all like the way that of how news is presented in a different form. BuzzFeed is way more popular with young people than it is for older people because of that untraditional way of producing stories. Media companies are in the business of news, they're in the business of making money too, and so they're going to try to match their stories and the way they present their stories to the audience that goes there. The news is tailored to you, and that can be good. It's convenient. Online media companies try to match and keep their audiences. So I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know that your Facebook feed can match what you like. And we bought a bicycle for Annie for Christmas, and I suddenly saw I still get them ads, that pop up not only on Facebook, but when I go to the Washington Post, there's an ad for a bicycle, girl's bicycle. I already bought it, but the ads pop up. It's creepy. It's weird. But that's what's happening in that targeting of audiences. Facebook decides what news you see. Roman numeral 9 on your supplemental has the trending news curators. There were humans that worked on Facebook's trending team. This article is fascinating to me. This is a woman who was a contractor, and she talks about what it was like to choose what links would appear on the Facebook trending box. It was on the right side of the user's news feed. That was her job. And they were eventually summarily replaced with technology. So if you want to click on and read that article, and then click on the next article from Slate that discusses the abysmal result of that when Facebook decided to try to use technology instead of humans to automate its trending news section. Not good. And of course, since that article happened, we've seen all sorts of problems with Facebook and fake news and all the other things that have been happening in social media. As I said, media companies are businesses. They're in the business of making money, and we like to think that they are altruistic in a lot of what they do, but they also know that what sells the most is conflict, and the more that you can create, at least in people's perception, a huge conflict, the more money you're probably going to make. And of course, nowhere do you find more conflict than you do in politics. So your next couple items there in on your supplemental has, and I think I said Roman numeral at some point in this thing. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong document. But anyway, on your supplemental number 9 and number 10, if you don't know who Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity are, then you can click on those links and just get a feel for what their home pages look like for their respective news organizations. But this conflict conflict sells. We if you love sports, because you love conflict. It's human against human, and politics has that kind of has those battles every day. I assume all of you know. I know. I asked you, how politically savvy or how much interest you have in politics. But we have the left, which are Democrats, who are called liberals, and if I can throw some stereotypes out, people who don't like people on the left call liberals lazy and bleeding hearts. They feel sorry for everybody. They don't really love America. They they love socialism instead of capitalism. So those are some of the disparaging things people say about the left. On the right, people say that the people on the right are gun worshippers, that they don't care about minorities or women or gay people. And in other words, if you're not a white male Christian, then we don't care about you. So those are some of the disparaging things people say about people on the right. And so this, they're clashing of ideals. It leads to theater, great theater at times, but it also leads to great division too. And so publications will cater to their audiences. We've talked about Fox News in class. If you want to click on number 11, back when Trump was running for president, this was a speech he gave about immigration. So click on that headline or on that link, and you're going to see the headline for this, that the president was born on this date when he gave this speech in September of 2016. So that's Fox News. That's on the right. Those are largely Republicans, conservatives. The same speech, right? Same speech as reported in Slate. So if you remember, you have that chart. See if you can pull up that chart and find out where Slate is. And then you can probably tell how Slate felt about that speech. This is letter number 12 on your supplemental. Slate calls the same speech vile. So on one side, on the right, you have a president was born. On the left, you have this man is vile. All right, that's the difference. How can one thing be perceived in such a great disparity? And yet, that's what we see depending on what site you go to. So, as I said in class, it's like two different worlds out there. Moving on, letter D talks about these distinctions. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong document. Sorry. There are distinctions in these liberal news organizations, and conservatives like to argue that they like to use the phrase liberal media, and they argue that media is this mainstream, although they call it lamestream media, that pretty much everybody is against conservatives except for Fox News, and which is really the predominant conservative mouthpiece. And yet, the true mainstream source out there isn't a source like CNN. It's actually, if you click on the link for number 13, it's actually Fox News. Fox News is not CNN, not NBC, ABC, CBS, none of the big three. Fox News is actually the most watched network on cable, and this is the third year in a row that Fox News is actually the mainstream news source. If you can scroll through that, you see just how much more Fox News is watched. 2.4 million people watch Fox News in prime time versus less than a million people watching CNN, or 1.8 watching MSNBC. Fox and Friends is the number one rated morning show. It's a show in the morning on Fox. Reports are that the president watches it every morning. In fact, there were just some leaked documents about Donald Trump and how he spends his days. So it's like it was a agenda, his daily agenda that wasn't supposed to be provided to media sources, but it was leaked to media sources. That he has, I forget how many hours a day. I don't want to be wrong. Several at least hours a day of executive time, which allows him to do any number of things. And I think it was described mostly as watching cable news, talking to friends on the phone. I forget other tasks he was doing, but he had a lot of executive time. I would like a lot of executive time. Would you like a lot of executive time? Anyway, but he is notorious for watching Fox and Friends. He'll tweet in real time sometimes as he sees a point that they make on that show. The liberals will argue that Fox and Friends is essentially state TV, that it is the mouthpiece for the president. It's gotten that bad in terms of the relationship between Fox and Friends or Fox and Trump. Sean Hannity even was brought up on stage at one of Trump's rallies fairly recently to promote the president and promote his ideas. Now, again, Hannity is not a journalist; he's a commentator, but he got a lot of flack, not only from more liberal-leaning media organizations, but even some people from Fox were upset that he made that decision. So, anyway, that's where we are with that. Let's go on to confirmation bias, which we have already talked about, and I already showed you the article. If you want to click on number 14 from the Washington Post, why facts don't matter to Trump supporters, but that could be Hillary supporters, Obama supporters, anybody. Facts don't matter to Patriots, New England Patriots supporters. That we go where we go to confirm our biases because it makes us feel good about ourselves and what we believe in. So you can again see why if you only go to Fox, if you only go to Slate, you're going to feel good because it confirms your biases, but I'm telling you, you are getting a skewed look at what's going on in our country and around the world. All right, well, let's lighten it up a little bit here. There's a guy named Jon Stewart. He's one of my all-time favorite people. He was the host of The Daily Show for a bunch of years until I think the last 2 years it's been Trevor Noah, who was at Miami, I think last year, I believe. And anyway, Jon Stewart is, I just find him hilarious. And it doesn't even matter if you agree with him politically. He's left-leaning. If you go to that chart, you'll see where the Daily Show lines up on the media chart, or at least the audience political views. And but I loved the Daily Show when he was on it because just the production of it. Again, not just what he said, but how he said it. He's just so clever and so funny. But I want you to watch a little bit of John. This is just entertaining stuff. And then I want you to watch a little bit of a man named Bill O'Reilly, who up until a couple years ago was a major. Well, he was the most watched news commentator on in TV. But Jon Stewart first. When you watch Stewart and O'Reilly, I want you to decide the age and political views of the typical viewer of these people. First, Jon Stewart. He was on the Daily Show, and he and his staff would regularly find moments on Fox News and make fun of them. I mean, they really just sat around all day and watched Fox and found little snippets of things that were said that they just found humorous, and then they would just go lampoon those people. So let's watch John in action on this first clip. He focuses on Sarah Palin. This was back in 2011. If you aren't aware, Sarah Palin was the vice presidential choice of John McCain back in 2008. She was roundly panned by Democrats for what they perceived to be her lack of understanding of basic issues. And in this clip, this is a few years after the 2008 election, she decided to go on a tour of the U.S. to meet with people and kind of give her message to the people. And so she stops in New York City and she meets with, guess who she meets with in 2011 in New York City? Donald Trump. So here's Jon Stewart in action with Sarah Palin and Donald Trump. So pause me and watch that video. Okay, and if you can't get enough of Jon Stewart, number 16 is it's just funny. If you're from Chicago, which I think about 83.2% of Miami students are from Chicago, then you probably won't like this clip. This is Stewart, who's from Jersey and, of course, lives in New York City, totally ripping on Chicago-style pizza. It's part of a larger segment on his show. I think it's only a few minutes long. Trust me, it's well worth your time. But he decides he's going. You don't have to watch this if you don't want to. I won't put this on the quiz, but this is Stewart saying why Chicago-style pizza is horrible and New York pizza is the best. So if you want, pause me and watch that a few-minute clip. Okay, so that's Jon Stewart. Next, we have Bill O'Reilly. And O'Reilly is in this clip discusses how the internet is deceiving you. Now, O'Reilly's not on the air anymore. He had sexual harassment complaints against him, and so he's been taken off the air. But at this point, at this clip, he was the most powerful voice on television in news organizations. So again, watch him, and after you watch him, tell me what's different about O'Reilly and Jon Stewart and the way that they tell their news. Tell me who would gravitate toward Stewart versus who would gravitate toward O'Reilly and why. So pause me and watch Bill O'Reilly. Okay, number 18 looks at where young people go for news. This one's fairly dated too, but in fact, it's pretty dated. It's from 2010, but the Pew Research Center talks more about how young people, where they're going to get their news, and it's not Bill O'Reilly. It's not the Bill O'Reilly type. But O'Reilly brings up a good point about the problem with the internet and how we, in some cases, aren't really able to check to see if something's true. That we don't check what that source is when we get that information, whether Vox is correct or incorrect in what it reports. O'Reilly makes a good point that for a lot of people, they'll go to HillaryIsEvil.com or TrumpSucks.com, and they just believe it without really understanding the source. Okay. The last part of this back and forth politically deals with number 19. That there are good reasons why people distrust and dislike the media when they do go to a site that doesn't follow what they believe in, and they listen to or they read extreme views. Well, then of course they're going to bash the media. The problem is saying that you don't like the media, or there goes the media again. The phrase "the media" is pretty big, all-encompassing term. You're talking about not only news organizations, but TV, radio, movies, music, and hundreds of companies, thousands, tens of thousands of people. And so it's not really wise. It's not really fair to denigrate the all of journalism just because you don't like what that one person says on that one network. So please read the editorial from the Washington Post on why people should stop calling just individual journalists or individual news organizations the media. So pause me, read that, and then come back to me. Alrighty, we are now moving to chapter 1, a little bit more with chapter 1. Page 5 talks about what news is. 3 things. News, to qualify as news, it needs to be relevant, useful, and interesting. You don't want to read something that's boring. You don't want to read something that's not relevant. And you don't want to read something that makes you feel like, okay, I got something out of that story. So if you're the editor of the Miami Student, and a student comes up to you and says, hey, I really want to write a story about the football team, would you tell that student, yeah, go do it? Or would you tell that student, no, we're not doing a story about the football team? My hope is you would say, no story about the football team. It's not relevant. Unless that writer can convince you, the football season's over. We're in February now. There are other sports going on. And so a football story doesn't really work. Now, if a reporter came to you and said, hey, I want to talk about a new healthy eating program on campus or a new workout that's at the rec, is that relevant? Absolutely. You got spring break coming up. Got to look good. Got to look good out there on the beach. So, yeah, that sounds good. That's relevant. It could be interesting. Depends on how well you write it, of course. And it would be useful for people who are looking to look good down there in Panama or wherever it is you people go these days. So relevant, useful, and interesting. Good stories must meet all of those criteria. If you look at the bottom of page 5 in your textbook, there are more specific elements that could go in a story to make it relevant, useful, and interesting. So please make sure that you read through that section there at the bottom of page 5 of other components that really help sell your story to readers. Okay? All right. Well, there's no question that journalists have an important responsibility. It's like the people we elect. Journalists are supposed to be representing us. They're supposed to be out there looking for corruption. They're supposed to be shedding light on key issues. They're supposed to be seeking the truth. They're supposed to help sustain communities. Journalists fail at this all the time. I hope you don't misconstrue me and think that I believe that journalists are perfect and always make the right decisions. Journalists fail for a number of reasons. They're incompetent. They are too ambitious. But journalists are supposed to follow some principles of good journalism. On page 10 in chapter 1, you'll see the 10 principles of good journalism. I don't expect you to memorize this list, but I do want you to see the awesome responsibility that journalists have, much like doctors have, much like teachers have, much like law enforcement. These are professions where you are supposed to follow a code and principles, and you are in the public eye, and the public demands we trust you. And so when journalists fail to live up to those standards, when doctors do, when teachers do, the public suffers. Great journalists take this list very, very seriously, and there are always bad ones out there that throw this list away. And when that happens, just like it does with doctors and teachers, then you know that it can damage the entire profession. There's an absolute need for journalists in a free society, and it's inarguable when you see that list of what journalists do on these pages. So when you go through that list, know that on the surface these look like positive responsibilities. I mean, who would get upset at a journalist for, if you look at the top of page 11, monitoring power, right? I mean, why is that bad that journalists want to monitor power? And yet many people hate when journalists do this, when journalists start poking around at the comfortable. Remember that phrase I said earlier this year, that journalists are supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And a lot of people don't like it when the comfortable are afflicted. So, for example, number 21 on your list has number 20 on your list has Miami's search for a new president. When Miami was looking for the person eventually became Greg Crawford, the university didn't want to reveal who the list of candidates were. They did not want to give that to the media, to news organizations. And news organizations said, "You're a public university, you have to." It's part of the public record, and Miami fought it, and eventually, as you'll read in that article, you'll see what happened. So pause me and read the article from the Miami Student. So, are you able to explain why, the point of view, why Miami didn't want to reveal that, and what do you think about Miami's stance? Do you agree with the university that the names of those candidates should have been left silent? Or how about number 21 on your video supplemental list? University of Cincinnati a few years ago was trying to join the Big 12 conference. This is a conference that has teams like Texas and Oklahoma, big schools and breeding grounds for great athletes, especially football players. And so UC is in a conference that's nowhere near of the national renown of the Big 12. So the university really wanted to join the Big 12. And they actually, again, this is a public university, had secret meetings with the Big 12 and were furious with the Enquirer when the Cincinnati Enquirer decided to print that story. And a lot of fans of the school and alumni and students were really upset at the Cincinnati Enquirer for shining a light on what was going on. Okay, what do you think? Should the Enquirer have done that? So read that article and then come back to me again and make sure that you have an opinion about that. All right, I'm nearly finished. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Still in chapter 1, if you go to page 12, accuracy is number 1. You're going to see that, hear that a lot this semester too. I don't care how well you write. I don't care if you're great at gathering facts or arguing an opinion. I don't care if you are wonderful at interviews. If you aren't accurate with your information, you're out. You're out. That's it. You won't have a great reputation, and in many cases, that's it for you. If you can't be accurate with your grammar and your punctuation and capitalization, then a lot of people will lose respect for you. Even if you are a wonderful writer, those errors, those typos can immediately just knock you out of the running. So your textbook says accuracy is the most important characteristic of any story, great or small, long or short. Always spell names correctly of people. Always. That's a killer if you don't do that. Maybe some of you back in high school, your name was in the yearbook and it was misspelled. That's a forever mistake. And for a lot of people, it's infuriating that their name is misspelled in perpetuity. So always spell names correctly. Always spell names of buildings and places correctly. Do you know how to spell Millette Hall, for instance? I wonder. Always quote accurately. Always get the details right. If people accuse you of writing a biased story, so for instance, even the Joseph Barrera story, if you consider that to be a biased story, fine. Okay, you can deal with that. You can deal with having a disagreement or an argument over whether a story is biased or unbiased. But an inaccurate story means that people won't ever trust you. You've lost that. And so you've got to be accurate. Fairness also. And so if you click on the struggling to stay active, I'm sorry, struggling to stay objective thing, I think that's what I want you to click on. Hang on. Yep, if you sorry. You know what? I'm going to delete that from the list. Don't worry about that. So it's not even going to be there. How about that? So we'll move on to talking about being accurate and being fair. The next item is number 22, and that's going to our friends at Fox who weren't so accurate. They report in this clip that President Obama at the time had planned to apologize to Japan for our country dropping bombs, nuclear bombs on that country back in World War II. So pause me and watch that clip. The problem with that report is wasn't true. Obama had no plans of apologizing to Japan. So the folks at Fox and Friends had to retract that original report. Go ahead, pause me, and then watch the click on the link to watch their retraction. So what do you think of that retraction? Is the apology good enough? What do you see that could be maybe potential issues with that retraction? And to make sure I'm not being biased toward the left, how about some retractions from the USA Today? Click on that link and you're going to see, oh, I don't know, a few corrections from the folks at USA Today. It starts with in February 2019, and then you'll see January, and then keep going, and it takes a while to get through January. I'm still scrolling. Finally, December 2018. So you see, there's a lot of mistakes. You're going to misspeak. You're going to say or write something that's just simply wrong. You're a human. But when you do it, you have to admit it. And you need to admit it in a way that people see it and it's clear that you are trying to atone for your mistakes. Speaking of mistakes, sometimes mistakes can be pretty funny. So I will leave you laughing. How about that? I'm just about finished. If you would, go ahead and go to your supplemental. And I decided to try to add some levity to this, I know, terribly dull lecture by showing some accuracy fails. So these are things that appeared in newspapers or online that I find rather humorous. So read them, enjoy. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I'll see you on Monday. Bye.